Okay, here we are again. This time early in the morning.
So early.
I'm tired. He's
I don't know
tired.
why I said yes.
But we're happy. At least I'm happy. Are you happy, Michael?
It's been a frantic morning, but I'm happy.
Yeah. It's gonna make it better. Uh, Today I'm here with Michael Binikos. It's been a teacher of mine here at MI since forever now. One of my first teachers, and we're here today to talk a little bit about him and about specifically uh how he came up in the studio life. He's a guy that went the whole ladder of the like from very bottom of a runner position to studio manager. I'm gonna read a little bit about him, but I'm gonna actually let him speak a little bit about
Don't you dare.
himself.
Don't you dare.
But anyway, here's the Michael Binikos teaches console operation and open counseling at MI. It's much more than that right now, I think.
Mm.
A 20-year veteran of the music business, he has worked as a record producer, engineer, writer, and or arranger for the Eagles, Donna Summer, Heart, LeAnn Rimes, Snoop Dogg, Kanye West, Emmylou Harris, and more. Michael operated Westlake Audio Recording Studio, which launched the careers of Michael Jackson, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Alanis Morissette. So, Michael, please welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today with me.
You're welcome.
And so, as I did with Francis, talk a little bit about you, how you come up.
Oh, wow.
Where you from? I don't know where you're from.
I'm actually born and raised here in Los Angeles.
Cool.
Inglewood. Yo.
South
and well, that's the west side. And I actually had an uncle in the record business. That's how I got familiar with it. But before that, I actually learned how to play the piano. And I have a twin brother, and we would play in a band together in the early days. And that, of course, led to recording sessions when we were kids. And our uncle, who had worked for United Artists and Capitol Records as a chief engineer for probably from the early 70s or even late 60s all the way through the 80s, introduced us to our first recording session here in Hollywood. It doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be on Orange. I think now it's a shoe store. But it was one of the premier demo studios for Liberty Records, which was part of Capitol at that time. And it was an 8-track studio. I think it was a 1/2-inch 8-track, so you don't see those very often. And we got to do, I think, 10 songs for free.
Awesome.
And it was my first experience in a studio, and it was pretty exciting. And I think I was 15 at the time. I think our dad had to even drive us up for the recording session. And that was my first introduction to actually what a session was and what
you played piano in that session.
I played keyboards at the time, and my brother played guitar, and yeah, it was like my first experience in it. And I thought, wow, you can make a living doing this. You can really do this. I knew my uncle was in the recording business, but I didn't really understand what that meant at that time until I actually saw it for the first time, and like bells started going off in my head, going, this is really cool.
Something,
yeah. So that's how I kind of got started, and it kind of flourished into develop my abilities to write songs and play a musical instrument, but also start learning more about MIDI. MIDI had just started back then. There wasn't a lot of people doing it, and so I was one of the first in my little cohort to actually start doing MIDI. And then it just kind of progressed from there. I was interested in learning more about it. We'd done more recording sessions with local studios. And I kind of just took on that natural producer role. I don't know how. It just kind of, you sit in a chair and you just start looking around and you start making ideas, and people start listening to you and like, okay, this seems to work. So
you start making decisions. People go along.
And like start learning things. I either you like sitting behind a desk or you don't. And most musicians typically don't. They like to play, they like to perform. They don't like to sit behind a board for 16 hours a day. I did, and I really was drawn to it. So that's kind of how it started for me. And then it just progressed from there.
Okay. And in that starting moment, were you operating to the consoles and or more as a real producer back in the day, the more giving opinions?
Well, before I went to recording school, I would just sit as a producer and just, bark orders to the engineer, not knowing really what he was doing, but assumed he was listening to me. I met some really good engineers early on that actually taught me things too. Not only my uncle, but several other engineers that we had used when we were in a band. And realizing more and more that if I wanted to be in this business, I had to understand what they were doing so I could talk intelligently to them. And so that was the catalyst to go to school. It was a 2-year program. It was here in Hollywood, and it was all analog. There was no digital discussion at that time other than maybe digital tape.
Yeah.
All the stuff that I'd learned after school, I'd learned on my own and in the field. But at that time, they were just teaching you the traditional analog engineering courses. And before I even graduated from school, they had placed me in a job working for a company that did what they call production coordinating, which not too many people do it today because you have too many producers now. But in those days, you had one producer that would organize the entire album. And it was a lot of work for one producer. And so they would hire these coordinators to do everything that they didn't want to do, such as book studio time, write up contracts for the AFM.
The annoying part of a production.
Yeah, the stuff that they just want to be in the studio and make music. They didn't want to do all that busy work. So they would hire, us. And so my job when I first started, my first job in the field was basically assisting producers. I wasn't even assisting engineers, I was assisting producers. So I got to see what producers did and how they got paid and how they controlled everything. So I was kind of a natural progression because I was always interested in producing. It was a natural fit for me anyway. The engineering part just kind of came because I was in the studio and I learned the engineering. I was never went to school to be an engineer per se, but it kind of ended up being a good fit for me because I could then branch out and do more and then understand the business more. So at that time, I was learning not only what the producer did, but how the business worked.
Yes.
How a record was made, who was in control of it, meeting label people, all those things. And so it was pretty interesting to start at that vantage point. So my first job was coordinating, and I was assistant to the coordinators. And I would meet with people like Michael Masser, who produced all the Whitney Houston stuff. I worked with him. A lot of Japanese producers, European producers. I worked with Michael, what's his name? Jeez. Other than Michael Masser, it was Phil Ramone. Phil Ramone produced all the Barbra Streisand, and he had done Simon and Garfunkel.
Cool.
So I had studied under him. Humberto Gatica, he took me under his wing. I got to see a lot of how he worked, not only as a producer, but as a mixer. That was pretty fascinating. I worked for him for a bit, and then we worked as colleagues for a while. So that was just like a David Cole, did all Vixen. He did Richard Marx. So that late 80s into that 90s pop rock stuff that I kind of, and awesome. They were big records. They were like talking $500,000, $750,000 for a record at that time, just for the production. So I got to see all that. And that kind of moved me into the next thing. I was still going to school. So once I was done with school, the coordinator gave me a great recommendation. She was wonderful to me, and said they knew that I was going to school for engineering. She goes, "What do you want to do?" They knew I didn't want to be a coordinator. I said, "Well, I want to go work for one of the studios." And they had been one of the biggest bookers of studio time at that time. I mean, they booked everything from Westlake to Capitol to Record Plant to A&M at the time. Now it's called Henson. And she said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go to Westlake." She says, "Hold on." She gave a call. She called up Steve Burdick, and Steve said, "Yeah, have him come over." He knew who I was anyway. I was always the kid with the cash. Every time a session was over, I'd run over to the studio and I'd pay everybody. I'd pay the studio, I'd pay the musicians, I'd pay the engineer, make sure everybody signed that I paid them. But I was the kid with the cash. So who didn't like the guy with the cash? And they knew who she was, and if she was giving a recommendation, then they were like, "He's got a job." I didn't even have to interview. He just says, "When do you want to start?"
That's pretty cool.
So I started working at Westlake in 1989.
Yeah. So I guess your interview was being the guy with the cash and not messing up
Yeah.
the cash part.
Yeah, I didn't mess up too much, I don't think. Otherwise, I don't think I got that job. But it was, as I look back on it now, it was kind of a confluence of events that actually happened to start a career that I, when you say, yeah, I'll work for a coordination company, and you're like, oh, what's that mean? And it was just a job. It was going to pay me money while I was going to school. And then it just opened up all these doors.
Mm-hmm. And when you got to Westlake, you were a runner.
Yeah, I started as a runner. So instead of assisting producers, I started, working as a runner for the studio. So my job was to make sure the facility was clean,
Mm-hmm.
answer the phones, get the food, anything that the studios needed. We had 7 studios at that time.
Mm.
And anything they needed inside those studios, I would go get or I would take care of. And that was a good experience. That was probably the most amazing experience because you see so many artists come and go. As a production coordinator assistant, you only see the ones that you work for.
Mm-hmm.
When you work for a studio like that has 7 rooms, you see everybody. And these studios were famous, and we had done 3 Michael Jackson records, and Quincy Jones was one of our biggest clients. And consequently, that's how I met Francis Buckley. He was working for Quincy. He was working for Glenn Ballard.
Yeah.
He was there quite often, so I got to know him, and it was a pretty good experience. Then you work your way up to a second engineer, and then quickly, I didn't stay in the second engineer position very long because they just moved me into managing the facility, and I kind of thought, well, it's not really the direction I wanted to go, but I thought, can't pass this up.
Yeah.
And because it's administrative, you want to be in the creative side, but at that time, even as a second engineer, it's not very creative.
Yeah.
You're patching cables, you're making sure the clients are happy. So when you move into that position, it opens other doors.
Yes.
And that's really what happened. So I ran for 1.5 to 2 years, somewhere in there, and then moved quickly on up to managing the studio.
So it was a really quick come up. I was going to ask about the time frame. You said it was 2 years, right?
At least 2 years within all those little levels. And I got to just meet a lot of people. And the other thing, when you work for a studio like that, people assume things of you that maybe aren't actually fair to assume of you, that you're actually a professional.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad they did. But it's a benefit of working for a studio that has a long history of making hit records.
Yeah.
That they decided we're going to employ you, and you're going to be our manager for the studios. And so that comes with a lot of weight and cachet. So kind of use that to my advantage.
Yeah. And managing a studio like that, big studio, big people coming in every day. I mean, I don't even know how to ask. Like, how's the day to day? How's the?
When you work from the ground all the way up, you get to see all the moving parts of the business. So by the time you get to that position, it's almost habit.
Mm-hmm.
But you're responsible for a staff of second engineers and runners. And you have to make sure that the studios are maintained, clients get billed, negotiating rates, all this stuff that seems boring.
Yes.
But needs to get done. Mm-hmm. And I got just to see how a business like that operated, and where we actually fit into the landscape of all these major studios. Because of all the Jackson records, and because Westlake made its own sound systems and speakers, we had this really wonderful reputation that some of the other studios shared, but not completely, because we not only were a studio, we also sold gear to our clients, and we also created and made a whole brand of speaker systems for studios like these.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had it was a very successful business at that time. I think we were doing it. Memory serves me correctly, I think we were doing $1 million a month.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, that was the 90s. 90s was I'd say the pinnacle of the record business. It was the golden age, because they had lots of money. They were throwing money at projects left and right, and they would sign 30 or 40 artists a year one label.
And it was the CD, right? Like you had
CD.
no streaming, you had no real alternative because
You couldn't burn a CD then.
and downloading was a
Download wasn't a thing yet. And just at that time, Pro Tools came into its own, and it was only maybe a 2-track system.
and if there's a single that you like, you have to buy the record
buy
for
it.
$16.
Yep. So the record business made a lot of money back in those days. I mean, hand over fist. They were signing artists that they were never going to put out because they didn't want somebody else having them.
Yeah.
That's how much money they had.
Yeah, I've read a book I'm actually recommending right now. I'm going to get the cover here somewhere. It's called Appetite for Self-Destruction. It's a book about that. I mean, the whole record business started from the 70s, but it focused on that part like 90s until the early 2000s until Napster comes in. And it goes all the way to streaming, but focus on that part. And like Michael said, it's when like labels got really big and money and people started getting greedy. And
stupid with cash.
Yeah.
Stupid, because if you think about it, the CD itself only costed actually about $1 to make, and they were charging $15 to $20 a CD.
Yeah.
Of course, there's all production costs and all that marketing costs that go into it. So even if they're into it for maybe $3, maybe a CD, they still had a massive profit.
Mm-hmm.
So it gave them a lot of money, and so they can sign bands for $1 million, and they can make $10 million music videos like Michael Jackson did.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, from what you remember, what is the most like the moment that you said, "Whoa, this is like too much money for something that didn't need"? I don't know, maybe a music video, maybe a session. You have that experience of someone asking for like 100 white towels and doves. I don't know.
Well, and when I was managing the facility, Michael Jackson's manager had called and said he's going to be coming in today, and just to have someone wait at the door for him. So I said I would wait. And you think he's going to come in with this huge entourage and limousine stuff, and he pulled up in a minivan and said hello and walked into the studio. Just Michael. He drove himself. And before he got there, I noticed there's a lot of commotion in that studio because they were going to do a pretty big choir session. It was for Dangerous. And I forget what song it was, but it was a pretty big deal. And he had his film crew show up prior to him getting there. And so I was chatting them up and saying, what's you doing? Because it wasn't like a home movie camera. They had set up a 35 millimeter camera, the stuff that they use on sets, movie sets. And I said, is this going to be in a video? What is this going to be? I mean, it's pretty elaborate. He goes, no, Michael has us come to all these things. And I said, to do what? He said, just to archive. He has probably more footage in archive that people will never see or will see at some point than people realize.
So he was just filming for
he documented
kicks.
Everything he did. He just had that kind of money. They would just come in and then set up 35 millimeter cameras to shoot a session. And that session was big because we brought in a whole choir. And so they filmed the choir. They filmed him. I think Quincy was there. I forget who was engineering. Probably Bruce Swedien.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the more elaborate moments that I can remember.
Peter Jackson, if you're watching this,
there's probably video. I know there is. I don't know where it would be, but it's definitely out there. He'd film everything. And sometimes he was very outgoing. Sometimes he would talk to you, and sometimes he would be pretty reclusive. It just depends on what kind of mood he was in.
Mm-hmm. Overall, nice guy?
Nice guy. I mean, as well as I knew him.
Yeah. I got a question that I was listening to a podcast by Alex Tomei. It's an engineer, young engineer today, and he mentioned that he was an intern or maybe an assistant at a studio, and he says that he was so good at being an assistant that he kind of stayed at that position until he noticed, like, I'm not gonna move from here, I think. So he changed studios, changed his job, and that got me thinking. That's why I wanted to ask you: is it possible to actually like really be a runner or a intern that's so good that you never climb the ladder?
Not a runner. Although I did, my immediate boss when I first started, who trained me, I would say he was a professional runner because he had no interest in being an engineer. He just liked the job. I think it was just one of those jobs that he some people like to have. But outside of that, I don't remember everybody just sticking around being a runner for that during that time, because they had a real program to move you up into the studios, because the people that were in the studios as second engineers, they would leave. So you need a funnel of new talent going into those studios to keep the facility running. So the way Westlake did it, and a lot of these others had done it, is that you cultivated your second engineers at that level. So they were never designed to stay at that position. That said, I know there were several engineers or second engineers that stayed second engineers for a lot of time, a lot of years. And whether they were good at it or not, I think what it ends up being is their ambition doesn't really move them to explore other options. For me, I remember the day I quit the studio. And it was like, I had a very big job at that time on the side. So I was producing on the side as well as working for the studio. And it was a very big payday. It was for 2 weeks. It was going to pay me more money than I was going to make in, I think, 6 months. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to leave now, I've got a bank full of cash and I have this momentum, so I'm going to leave. And some people choose not to. Some people are too afraid to make that change and take that risk. They want to kind of have something that's predictable. And for me, I was never afraid of change. Was never afraid of taking risk. I think if you want to be in this business, you have to embrace risk, because it's all about risk and risk management. So for me, that was scary, and I did it, and I never looked back. It kind of worked out for me, but you make your own roads. They don't come to you. You make your own. Sometimes you make good decisions that pays you very well. Sometimes you make bad decisions that don't. And then you've just got to manage your time. If you're not one that knows how to manage their time, meaning you get up at 10 instead of get up at 8, then maybe it isn't for you. But if you're good at managing yourself and discipline, there's nothing that stops you from doing whatever you want.
I remember something that really struck with me when I had my first classes with you was you mentioned, like, this is the time. Now I'm in my early 20s. Like, it's the time to grind. Like you said, wake up earlier. If you don't, make the day count. Like, every day should be a day of improvement. And I keep in mind that even if it's not a big productive day and I feel like I didn't do a whole lot, just make something that makes me think, okay, I'm a better engineer, I'm a better producer, mixer, whatever. I'm a better professional today than I was yesterday, even if it's just 0.5%.
Believe me, there were days that I had nothing to do. And you'll see that in Hollywood a lot. Where are these people sitting around having coffee out in the middle of the day? Where are their jobs? Because we work independently. So we find our jobs, we work, and then we have this time off. And if you make enough money when you do work, there's enough cushion so that when you're not working. But for me, I was never comfortable not working. So I will always do something to further whatever. Maybe it's all I would do is make a phone call that day just to set up another job. Maybe it was setting out demo tapes to various publishers. Whatever it was, if I wasn't doing something to further that I felt like was a waste of a day. And there's always something you can do. There's always somebody you can call. Now with modern technology, you're emailing, you're texting, there's so many ways you can get in your social media. We didn't have social media back then. So everything that you got was word of mouth, reputation. It was a very small knit community that knew who you were and what you could do. And you were just relying on credits. People look at your credits on work that you did and then call you. It was that simple.
And even if you have like an hour, maybe set up a mix session that you're going to do later. Do the routing. I don't know. There's little bits of moments throughout the day that you can get more productive, right? And
I think people that want to do this for a living, they can't stop or they can't help themselves but do something. You have to. That's something in you.
Since we're on the subject, I think it's good for us to we're towards the end of the interview, so I'm going to bring in some questions from people.
Sure.
First, I'm going to ask you, like, today, I mean, the industry changed a lot, but a lot of stuff still the same. You, Michael, to the people watching this, I would like you to give some advice and vision on what do you expect and what the industry expects from assistants, second engineers, and people that are coming up, like qualities that we all know, like punctuality, you know, uh,
I
being
always say
valuable,
this.
but
I always say this in my class, and I think it still would be a good advice.
mhm,
The one thing that you want to project or to get your boss to understand, or your potential boss to understand, is that they can trust you. And it comes down to just that word, trust. If they don't trust you, they aren't going to give you the keys to the building. They're not going to let you have any access to their clients. Forget about the mic closet that has, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of microphones there. If they don't trust you that you're going to show up and do the job, there's nothing that's going to happen after that. So trust is a huge part of it. How do you convey trust? It's all about how you present yourself. If you're going to be somewhere, for me, and maybe it's just being neurotic, I'm always early. I have no ability to be late. I don't know what it is about me. I'll rather be early and sit in a car and wait for the time to come than to be late and hustling. It's just not in me. I don't like that part. I don't like that stress. So for me, I'll be there early. And so it's the little things like that that show you're able to handle it. They don't really care so much about how much knowledge you come with from a school. They want to know you went through a program, and that's about it. Everything else that you're going to do is going to be proving yourself every day at that job. Mm-hmm. So my advice is to display the utmost amount of trust that you can, because that's going to get you much farther. And if you're likable, it's even better. Yeah. I used to see kids that are not likable and they still get jobs. If you're likable and you're trustworthy, you'll go far. And here's another thing. Keeping your mouth shut and keeping your ears open is probably the best advice. I've always done that naturally because I don't talk a lot. This is probably the most I'll talk today. And only because I know what it means to listen to people. And you should always be around people that are more successful than you. That's always been one of my secrets. Yeah. You be around people that are more successful than you. If you're the most successful person in the room, find some friends that are better. Find some friends that are more successful, because you will learn from them. Yeah. And that's how we grow. And that's how we get better. We mimic other people that are successful. And that's all I did. Yeah.
And I like to compliment that, me being an assistant right now in my life, I feel like I agree with everything, and like be useful no matter what. Like I said, 9 times out of 10, your employer is not gonna want you to know how to mix like Al Schmidt, or want you to know, like, just be little things, like
know how to make a coffee.
Learn to make a coffee, do the dishes. Like when I got into the studio that I'm working, my boss says that the moment he knew I was the guy for it, there was no how can I say, it was no cloth on the kitchen to wipe the dishes. And the next day I brought it from home, my own cloth, like those little things, nothing to do with audio, nothing to do with music. No,
it's truly, if you take pride in what you do, and it's noticeable.
Yes.
One of the things I noticed that when I started becoming into the studio as a client is the ones that I liked working with after that was the ones that stuck by my side the entire time. They wouldn't just walk out the door, have a smoke, and then you go, where are they? I got to go find them now. And so I got to get out of my chair, go around the building, see where they're at. The ones that always work with me, the ones that I always like working with, was the ones that sit next to you and they did anything that you needed them to do. And they were interested in the job. They were interested in the music you're doing, regardless if they liked the music. They never showed it. Those are the ones that I would call up the studio manager and go, make sure Brian's in my session. He's awesome. I don't want to do another session without Brian. Yeah. And they would know that. And they would go, Brian, what are you doing? You're doing something right.
You got to make yourself valuable, like, so that when you're not there, they miss you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I got a question. So it looks like this question, but Guy, old Brazilian student,
of course,
back in Brazil, and he specifically said to me, he wants to know which qualities do you value in a producer, but he said, get a good answer out of him. I don't want to hear, punctuality, being nice. No, give me a good one. Like,
For me, when I first started this business, I was in a band. So we had a publishing deal, we had development deals, and the producers that came and worked with me and my band were top of the game. I mean, Phil Ramone came and produced my band. David Cole mixed. My Humberto Gatica mixed. So the ones that I always gravitated to was something that you would learn from. So from Phil, I learned how vocal sessions should be done. I mean, he was very calm. He let you feel like you're in good hands. You could trust him with, what he was doing. And I thought, well, that's the best way is to get them to feel comfortable around you. And so I found ways from each of those people that I'd experienced, take bits and pieces of what they taught me and put it into me. And so for me, my biggest asset as a producer, and I think this probably answers Guy's question, is that you're not trying to change the artist, you're trying to enhance them. There are producers that like to come in and rip whatever they had going and start over and make them what they think they should be. And then the people that know how to take the best of what they already are and make them better. That's really what your job is, to make them better. And if you're not making them better, then I think you're in the wrong business. Unless you're dealing with an artist that has no clue what they're doing, which typically if you've gotten a record deal, you've had some people believe that you have talent and that you have a persona. Then all I have to do is just come in and go, okay, how can I make this better? How can I elevate you? That's really the best qualities of a producer. Not to change you, not to turn you into something that you're not, but to elevate you. Yeah. Elevate your natural abilities and make the best version of you.
Yeah, we're only helpers, right?
We're facilitators.
Facilitators.
Producer is exactly the word. We produce things. We make things. We don't change things. We make things. We make something from a product that is already given to us. We just kind of finish it.
Yeah. Awesome. I think this is a good one to close out. Michael, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Real pleasure.
My pleasure.
Do you have anywhere where people can find you, or do you not want people to find you?
I have Instagram. You can follow me there.
You know Instagram?
Shoot, I don't even know my handle.
I'll put it in here.
Yeah, it's gonna be right there. That's how much social media I do. But that's probably the best way.
Awesome. Thank you guys for watching. If you like, comment, all that jive, you already know.
Don't
just
even
leave.
comment.
If you're here,
that's how you get more people to come. Just say don't don't comment at all. Forget it.
People get.
Then they go, well, how dare you? I'm going to comment right now.
Okay, guys. Thanks so much, Michael. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Have a good one, guys.